Did you know that St. Luke's University Health Network, based in the Lehigh Valley, Pennsylvania, has been recognized by the U.S. government as the highest performing health system in the United States for quality? You heard right. St. Luke's #1 recognition affirms our status as the top leader among the most respected healthcare providers in the nation, including Houston Methodist and the Mayo Clinic. To state it simply, if you want to receive the best care when you go to a hospital, come to St. Luke's.
This is Full Court Press with Sean Spicer.
Sean Spicer will be getting a new position.
A decorated veteran, a political strategist, and he knows Washington inside and out.
Just like Sean Spicer.
The Spicer era.
Sean Spicer.
The Full Court Press is on the air. Now, here's Sean Spicer.
Good Sunday morning to you. Welcome to Full Court Press. I'm your host, Sean Spicer, here on WABC. A big week to break down a lot and a lot to look forward to. The president, obviously, over there in China. An interesting take about what was accomplished and what not, what wasn't. Some interesting moves. I'll talk about that in just a second. And then a lot of talk about this potential Vance-Rubio 2028 ticket. I'll give you my take and give you some where this thing is headed right now. Later in the show, I'm going to give you the latest on redistricting. And as I did last week, I'm going to be honest with you guys. There's nowhere else you're getting this. It kills me every time I turn on and I flick through. I have an addiction. I do watch cable news from time to time because I have to keep up. But I'll tell you, every time I read one of these stories online or watch cable news and there's some pundit talking about, can the Republicans keep the House? And da, da, da. They literally have never run a race. They've never been involved in politics, and they're just literally regurgitating the same points that the last so-called pundit spewed out. No one wants to actually look at the numbers. And, it's like if you're a sports person, and I imagine, I've got some friends of mine that are real big into sports, and they yell at the screen sometimes, and they watch these sports analysts being like, that's just not how the game is played. Or, you hear these people who've never been on the field for whatever sport it is, trying to tell you about how it goes down and how the players are acting or interacting and whatever. And I feel the same way about politics. It's like a doctor watching, ER. They're like, that's not how we would treat a patient. The problem with these pundits is they like to just say stuff like, well, I read historically, and that's dumb. Races have to get run. There's two candidates. And I'm going to break this down for you in literally a way that nobody else will anywhere. I watch all the time. I'm trying to find somebody who's doing anything, and they're not. And then I've got, in just a few moments, exclusive brand new polling on the mood of the electorate. And I kind of peaked. It's not great. But I'm going to let Brent Buchanan, he is the president of Signal Research, give it to you straight. And again, we're not going to sugarcoat it. Signal is one of the best, most prominent, respected polling firms out there. And I'm going to tell you where to get it, how to share with it, all this information. I mean, but I'm not going to sugarcoat it for you. I'm not going to tell you everything's great. I'm not going to tell you that we're kicking butt. We got some problems, folks. The good news is we can fix them. We have time. We're 5.5 months out. But I see sometimes people put their head in the sand and say, okay, well, that's just not true. And if that's what you want to believe, it's like going to the doctor. Like, they're giving you the data. They're telling you what's wrong. You can either make certain lifestyle choices or you don't have to. No one's forcing you to do this. If you want to get better, you want to live longer, you got to take the advice. Well, I'm going to tell you the same thing in politics here. There's a lot going on. And, I talk to a lot of people. I'm sure you guys have people in your friend group or community or coworkers, yes, there's a lot of support for what's happening, but if you don't win this thing decisively and keep a majority in, it all goes away. One seat. We have a 2-seat majority right now. 1-2. And we're able to move the Trump agenda through, the America First agenda through. If we lose it by 1 seat, it goes poof, bye-bye. I talked to Steve Bannon on my nightly show on Friday. He made the same point. Like, 1 seat makes the difference between Hakeem Jeffries as Speaker of the House and Mike Johnson. So you think about this seat, this Mike Lawler seat up there in New York. He's critical. He's running a killer campaign. He's raising a boatload of money. He's got a weak candidate, but he has to win. Richard Hudson from North Carolina is the congressman in charge of the National Republican Congressional Committee. It's the campaign arm of House Republicans. He was asked the other day about how many incumbents might lose, whatever, and he said it doesn't matter. Like, we have one seat majority. Everyone counts. Every seat matters. And he's absolutely right. And that's why the redistricting that I'm going to tell you about in just a little bit is so super important. Because every seat counts right now. We have a one seat majority. There's a dude, and I think he's from North Carolina. He's a Republican. He's having some ethical issues apparently about how he dealt with staff. I'm sort of appalled at some of the behavior that he may have exhibited. But I'm just going to tell you this right now. There's going to be a big struggle if more comes out on this guy, because in any other normal world, he would be expelled from Congress. But Speaker Mike Johnson knows that you expel that guy and you're potentially, and I say the word potentially, in the middle of this term putting Hakeem Jeffries up for Speaker. That's the reality. I'm just, that's where we are right now. It's bigger than any one person. So I want you to understand what a razor's edge we're at. And when I talk to people about Trump 2.0, the book that I put out, that's a bestseller now on the New York Times bestseller list, part of it is to make sure everyone understands the magnitude of what's happening. This agenda doesn't stop, but it gets, the brakes thrown on it if we don't go out there and maintain it. And that means, when I talk to groups, what does that mean? It means posting and talking and calling and engaging, because the biggest thing, I know consultants love to run ads, but here's the little secret about politics, the dirty little secret that consultants don't want. The number one most persuasive thing that any candidate can do is have other people talking to their neighbors, their family, their friends, and their coworkers, bar none. Those personal interactions trump everything else. Everything else. Now, consultants don't make a penny off that, so I don't want to tell you that. But that's just the reality, folks. That's the reality of this. So the more that when we have a job to do, that's us. That's how we can help do this. If you support President Trump, this is what our responsibility is. It's to go have these conversations ahead of the election. All right. Before I get to Vance v. Rubio, I want to tell you a little bit about this trip, because the president, I think there's definitely some positive takeaways from this trip to China. But first and foremost, I think people have to understand, when Biden was in office for a while, the so-called red phone didn't work. There's these interactions that have to be maintained. The chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, and okay, they need to make sure that they're talking to their counterparts in case something's going down, that they have a direct line to say, hey, we're not firing that missile, or hey, this didn't come off this way. When Biden came into office, things had deteriorated so bad that they weren't even picking up the phone. We weren't talking with them. That's bad. And Trump understands that having a healthy and open relationship with China right now is important. They're militarily and economically huge. I mean, don't get me started, though. I think the biggest mistake that we're making as a country is not having a plan to decouple. China has been very clear. They want to take over the world. Economically, militarily. I don't want to get off on the soapbox right now, but I'm just telling you guys that, in the interim, we need a two-part plan. We need to have a relationship with them, but we also need to understand that, these guys pose a threat to us. They're not kidding. And one of the big tells was during this trip, President Xi supposedly told President Trump, we need to get this Taiwan thing straight or there's going to be problems. Basically, you need to change your position on Taiwan. Let us take over this, quote, rogue island. But it's much bigger than Taiwan, folks. This isn't just some little island off the coast of China that they want to reunite with. It's strategically critical because the whole South China Sea, freedom of navigation, do you know how much commercial enterprise moves through there? And I'm just telling you, they take that over, and that's going to be a big, big problem. Commercially, economically, not to mention militarily. But there's a lot at stake. And so the lefties all were freaking out that Trump was going to go over there and start to give away Taiwan. And then the automakers were all freaked out about the EVs too. They're going to give access to the U.S. market for these cheap Chinese EVs, which is what Europe kind of is doing, by the way. I mean, these guys, everybody sells out for the cheapest thing, and China knows that. That's what they remember we were doing that with Huawei computers. It took the U.S. intervening with Europe and saying, hey, you guys dum-dums, you do all this stuff. You're not thinking they're going to try to infiltrate your entire system. through the back end of their computers. They're now doing it with the EVs. But so for all the bedwetters on the left who were like, oh, Trump's going to go soft on China and he's going to go soft, none of that happened. Of course, they're not going to talk about it now. They had plenty of time, days leading up to this trip that, oh my God, we got to worry about this. None of it happened. None of it. They don't ever want to tell you that, right? It's fun and funny. They all tell you about how bad everything's going to get. The economy's going to crater under Trump. It flourishes. They never tell you that they were wrong and that it actually went the opposite. They just don't do that. They're dishonest people. That's just a fact. All right. But anyway, there's some commitment to buy 200 Boeing planes. I mean, look, I've never bought a Boeing plane. I don't think many of us have bought a Boeing plane. But let's just say that this is these 737, the 747, the 777. These aren't cheap, right? This is a big deal. A lot of jobs at stake. Just telling you. I mean, like this is big. So there's some good economic stuff. They're apparently buying some soybeans. That's important politically because Iowa's at stake. Also, not just politically, but there's some good economic news in that. But anyway, I think what I would say is that the jury's out, and then the other on the economic piece, and then obviously, what do they do to help us, if anything, with Iran? That's going to be important, and I keep an eye on the president for that because at the very least, keeping China not engaged. China gets all this oil from them. They're the ones who really care about what's going on in the Strait of Hormuz. As I've told you guys in the past, we talk about this almost every week. We're not in the same boat that they are by any means. We get like 2%. There's not a ton. We're good. It's the Chinese who need to get the Strait of Hormuz open, and I think the president was making it very clear, hey, can you help us? Anyway, I think it's a push a little bit right now. We'll see what really comes to this. But anyway, let me get to this Vance v. Rubio thing, because the president teased it the other day before he left for China on the Rose Garden. He was like, who do you guys like? Do you like Marco Rubio? And they clapped, all right. Do you like J.D. Vance? And they said it's a great ticket. And Rubio is definitely a scent. There's no question. But I've said this before on my morning show, and I want you guys to understand this. Rubio is Secretary of State. He is very much handcuffed politically. He can't go do certain things. He can't have a political team set up stuff. He can't raise money. He can't go visit states. And so he gets a bit of a pass. But remember, for all these people who think that somehow he's just going to run, that's not how it works. He actually would have to have a political operation, which he doesn't have. So there's an interesting poll. Everybody else talk about this because Rubio received 45.4% of support from Republican voters in a new Atlas survey, which is much higher than both J.D. Vance and Ron DeSantis. But again, it's like asking somebody about a race that they're not entered to run. J.D. Vance has so many institutional advantages. He's the chairman of the Republican Finance Committee, which means he's meeting all these donors. He's building up this huge political operation. He's got, because he can, a ton of people working with him politically that are setting up this operation. He's working within the states to set up key folks if he wants to run for president. And then he's going out there. He's visiting Maine last week. He's been in Ohio. He's setting up all these task force on fraud. He can do that kind of stuff that Rubio just can't do. And he was asked about running with Marco when he was kind of highlighting this fraud task force that he set up. Take a listen to this.
Can you tell me a little bit about, the president has been toying this idea of a joint ticket between you and Rubio. What do you think about that?
Oh, man. What I think is there are a few topics that I want to talk about less than what office I'm going to run for years down the road when I'm having a good time and trying to do good work in the job that the American people already elected me to do. Look, as I've answered this question probably in any number of ways. I love Marco. I think he's a great Secretary of State. He's become a very, very dear friend. But I think both of us are very much focused on accomplishing the American people's business right now. If I was the American people, there are few things that I would hate more than a person who's barely been in one office for a year and a half, who's angling for a job 2.5 years down the road. Let's do a good job now. We just got to keep at it. Go.
I mean, look, that's the right answer, just to be clear. That's the right answer. Like starting to talk about this when you've got all these other issues and you got an election coming up and you've got some, like you're going to hear from Brent Buchanan in just a second in polling. Like that's the right answer. That is how that's happening. Unfortunately, you've got a boss like Donald Trump that's egging this on. This is what Donald Trump, I told you, he was in the Rose Garden the other day. He's meeting, I think it was Police Week. Well, it was Police Week. And he was meeting with these folks and he said, he's talking about who do you like? And he started to say, well, it's a great ticket. And then Vance was asked again about, President Trump stoking this, and this is what he had to say.
a couple days ago, Trump made this statement to people in the Rose Garden. Why do you think he does that? Do you think it's a little bit of toying with you both over your succession? Why do you think he brings that up? Just number one.
Well, I just don't think it sounds like the President of the United States to have a televised competition for who would succeed him as his apprentice. I just think that's not at all what you would expect the President to do. But no, I think the President, he's always been fascinated by politics. If you talk to him, he was fascinated by politics 30 years before he ever ran for office. So I think it's natural for him to, joke around with us a little bit, to play around with the idea. But I can tell you the President is as focused as any of us on making sure we do as good of a job now for the American people.
By the way, you got to give the guy credit. He had fun with it, didn't he? I mean, it's like, can you imagine this guy, Donald Trump, having a apprentice-style televised deal to see who'd be his successor? I mean, anyway, good on JD for being funny about this. Anyway, when we come back, Brent Buchanan, the president of Signal Polling, is going to give us the latest update just out of the field with their national voter survey, where things stand, what Republicans need to know. Stick with us. You're listening to Full Court Press on WABC with Sean Spicer.
This is Full Court Press with Sean Spicer on 77 WABC. The Full Court Press is on the air. Now, here's Sean Spicer.
All right, welcome back to Full Court Press. I'm your host, Sean Spicer. Good Sunday morning to you. I have an amazing guest teed up. Have him on the Sean Spicer Show from time to time. But I wanted to get him back on this show ASAP because he has a little bit of a 12-alarm fire to share with us. Brand new exclusive polling coming out from Signal. And I've told you guys in this past, if you watch the show, these guys are constantly rated as one of the top pollsters in the nation. Regardless of party, because they're accurate, their insights, their analysis is spot on. This time, though, I don't mean to kick off a week with negative information, but Brent Buchanan, the head of Signal, gives it to us straight every time. They've got their brand new monthly national voter survey out. Brent, welcome to the show. I normally am excited to break down the numbers for you, but I read ahead. I'm a little concerned about where we are. And I know you're the messenger, so I don't mean you, but you're telling us this national survey shows a lot of change from last month.
Yeah, there's been some shifts. They have been more macro political economic or environment, than they have been specific to what's going to happen in the race for Congress. But definitely some warning bells going off that we need to be paying attention to, and that Republicans who are currently in Congress and in the White House need to probably make some course adjustments before the macro environment hits the micro.
So in other words, this is going to the doctor and hearing, hey, you're not dead yet, but there are some lifestyle changes you need to make, right?
Yeah, you got to quit drinking. We got to cut back on mistakes.
Okay. All right. Well, I may let's get to our polling thing. Where is the generic ballot? That's asking when you guys ask this question, would you rather have a Republican or Democrat represent you? Where is that now, and how has that shifted?
So it has barely shifted. Last month, we had a Democrat lead of 5.5. For some context, about this point in 2018, which was not a great midterm year for Republicans. It was Trump's first midterm in office. It was at Democrat +7, and it ended up at Democrat +9, and Democrats won a lot of seats and took over Congress, and we got Speaker Nancy Pelosi out of that deal.
So we're not there yet.
Right. 5.5 last month, 6.1 this month. So, it is creeping in the wrong direction after having been relatively stable prior to March. The Iran war has taken a toll on how people feel about where the country is headed and how they feel about Trump, and it's leaking into this generic ballot.
Okay. The big additional question beyond that you guys always ask is what do you think the direction of the country is going? So lay out the question. Where are we now on that? And how has it changed?
So the way we ask that question is, generally, would you say things in the United States are headed in the right direction or off on the wrong track? Now, this has not been in positive territory since I've been a pollster. So we have to keep that in mind, too, that this is not an indicator where if it's upside down, whoever's in charge definitely loses. It's really more about the direction and the delta between wrong track and right direction. And this month, we're now at 60% wrong track, 37% right direction. Back in March, before the Iran war started, that was at 55-43. So a whole lot closer. I mean, that's what, a net 13% difference. And now we're at a net 23% difference. And one of the biggest changes that we saw on that question is that people who say that they are strongly Republican dropped a net of 24 points negative in the country direction. So they were plus 85, big, super happy about the direction of the country, all the way down to plus 61, which is positive. But we have to keep in mind that this is the base. So the base is starting to believe in just one single month very quickly. I think it's a combination of Iran and inflation, and inflation because of Iran, that we're even seeing the hardest core voters not feel that the country's headed in the right direction. But those voters are still telling us, I'm literally 100% going to vote for the Republican candidate for Congress.
But Jimmy, I just want to make sure I'm hearing this. Brent Buchanan, I want to make sure I'm actually hearing this correctly. So last month, 85% of Republicans who consider them strong, hardcore Republicans, the kind of folks that go out there and vote, 85% said, I think the country's kind of going in the wrong direction. I mean, the right direction. I feel good about everything. But now it's 61, meaning about 25% of less Republicans share that view now in 1 month, in 30 days.
Well, so it's net. It's subtracting wrong track from right direction. So we always try to look at the nets over time because it's easier to compare. But there's been a large drop-off among these strong Republicans on direction of the country.
So, and these are the folks that if you're running in a midterm election, these are your base voters, right?
Yep. And they're Trump.
And what? Jeez. Oh my God. All right. And then what do they think about Trump favorability wise? Are they still that not just the country, but are they still on board with Donald Trump as president?
That's a good question. Let me actually pull that data point up real quick here. So they're still holding strong at 94% favorable of Trump, which is, and they haven't increased at all in unfavorability of Trump. So it's really more, I look at this as a funnel, and how people view the country as the top of the funnel, how they view Donald Trump as the next step of the funnel, how they view the two parties is the third rung and is getting smaller. And then it goes all the way down at the bottom of the funnel to who are you going to vote for Congress, the Republican or the Democrat.
All right, but they're still with Trump, though. They're like, hey, Things might be going great, but I'm still sticking with my guy.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
And they're sticking with Republicans on the ballot. But it is a warning sign when you see that much of a degradation at the top of the funnel.
Okay.
That it can work its way down.
So what is driving that then? What is the consternation that voters are is it just Iran, or what is the issue that you guys seeing the most that is really top of mind for voters?
Well, it's inflation, and it's grown pretty drastically in the last few months, even among the strong Republicans. So going back to the beginning of the year to now, it's almost a 10-point increase in concern among the hardest core Republicans about the direction of the country. And overall voters, so all voters, it's gone in March from 19% to 26%. That's a really large increase. However, it is a lot of that concern about inflation is driven by strong Democrats and left-leaning independents. And that group already hates Trump, and they're already energized to go vote. So that's why I say there are warning signs, but not the five-alarm fire right here. We just need to get the fire trucks ready. for this, and we're going to have to take a little bit different tact in how we're talking to voters and what we're talking about and the tone we're talking to them in, because we're still 5.5 months away from the election, which is a political eternity. And I will use that phrase, political eternity, probably all the way out until 3 months before the election, because just so much changes, and the people who decide elections really don't tune in until the final 2 months anyways.
So that's when you think, I always say Memorial Day, like that's when people start, like the very beginning of tuning in. You think we've got until, if I do my math correct, I mean, basically late August, is that, where's your window where you start saying that, hey, get those fire trucks really fired, revved up?
School going back in, because a lot of the base that's going to decide the election, not the bases, but the people who are going to decide the elections are between the age of 30 and 54. They are parents. They are folks in the formative, on the younger end of that, in the formative parts of their career. They're the people who want to be buying homes and aren't able to right now. So those people will tune in once their kids go back to school in, depending on if you're in the South, early August, to the North, late August, early September. That really is the time frame by which, if we don't have gas, closer to $3 to $3.50 a gallon, preferably $3. And if all these fuel costs have not been able to drop the price, because nobody believes that we're going to deflate. I do focus groups all the time, and when people bring up inflation, nobody says, I want a steak to go back to $4 a steak. They believe that they know that's not going to happen. What they want is the increase to stop. And so if all of this falls into place to where Iran war is over, energy production is increased, and it's had enough time to work through the system to where people are like, oh, okay, well, actually saw a slight decrease in the price of beef. And then that maintains, that will buy us a lot of goodwill as Republicans going into this midterm. But the inverse is true, that if we don't, it will be challenging going into the midterm.
So what they really want is stability.
They want stability. They want to know what the plan is. I can't tell you how many times, and again, I bring up focus groups because I do so many of them across the country, and getting to hear from real, regular people about how they're feeling on this and what impact it's having. They just want to know what the plan is, and they will give a lot more rope. They will give a lot more grace to Republicans if we would just lay out, here is the plan.
Yeah. Obviously, Brent, when you guys look, you're not just looking at, elections are about two sides. You got the Republican side, you got the Democratic side. What is the contrast between how Republicans are viewed versus how Democrats are viewed currently?
So we ask Democrats in Congress and Republicans in Congress specifically, just because we want to bias it for that reason. Because when somebody goes to vote for Congress, they're going to vote for one of those two parties for Congress. Okay. And so right now we have Democrats at 53% unfavorable and Republicans at 55% unfavorable. So not a huge difference on unfavorability there. The problem is that Democrats are 42% favorable and Republicans are 39% favorable. So again, talking back to nets, Democrats are net less unfavorable. Republicans are net more unfavorable. And the problem has really been the trend of that. And what we've noticed in the last couple months, kind of going back to March is when the Iran war started, that Democrats have, picked up about a net 6 points on less unfavorable towards them. And Republicans have stayed about the same at negative 17 unfavorable. So, and going back to the generic ballot of you want the Republican or the Democrat for Congress, Democrats have been for the last few months hovering between 49 and 48.5%. So this drop in the generic ballot is actually people who were voting for Republican going to undecided, which means they're still gettable to bring back into the camp. They're not moving to Democrats, but as we always like to triangulate data, one data point doesn't tell a story, but three against each other do. So when we look at this increase in Democrats' image among voters, it's laying the groundwork for where some of those people who went Republican to undecided might go undecided to Democrat. And that's why it's important to get out there, be playing offense, have the plan, contrast against, this is what voting for a Democrat gets you, this is what voting for a Republican gets you. Because right now, voters are really thinking about this in terms of Trump or not Trump.
Interesting, because I was talking about this. I do this live political show on weekdays called The Huddle, and I was texting you earlier, we're going to talk about some of your polling, and one of the listeners in our sort of post-game Zoom call that we have on Fridays asked me, what do you think Republican candidates should do? And so I'll pose this to you as the guy with the data and the answers at Signal Polling here, which is, I think there's three buckets. Bucket one is, here's what I did for you, right? So if you're a Republican, you're talking about the big, beautiful bill, no tax on tips, all that kind of stuff. Two is you're saying, by the way, the other choice, the Democrats, here's the nutty, crazy stuff they'll do to you. They'll open the borders back up. They'll pack the court. They'll raise your taxes. But then three, that they've also got to add in a mixture of, and here's what I will do for you. So that's my analysis. What is yours? If Republicans in Congress say to you, Brent Buchanan, you guys at Signal Polling have gone through all this, like, what do we need to do? What do you give them as an answer?
That's very similar to the three buckets I would give, but I would prioritize them in that order also. The least important thing is what I have done, because voters expect to have voted for you to do something for them. So you can't solely run on here's what I've done, especially when you see these numbers on economic approval and direction of the country going the wrong direction. You can't say here's what I've done, because they're like, well, I don't necessarily know if I want more of that. Which is why you have to say what you're going to do next and paint the optimistic future. But if we remember back to the 24 election, every single thing was contrast. Kamala Harris is for they, them, Trump is for you, was the contrast. And we were not at a national crisis of transgender surgeries for prisoners paid by taxpayers. Yet that is exactly what the number one ad spent money on was in the presidential race. So I also think that some of the things that are going to be those contrasts are not really in the conversation yet. And I'm really excited for my buddy James Blair, who was Deputy Chief of Staff of the White House, who's now going to go run the outside campaign for Trump and all those efforts, because he knows how to play hardball. He knows how to contrast. And that's going to be really important, because currently the contrast is, do I want what Trump and the Republicans are doing, or do I not? And we lose in that contrast.
I agree. Yeah, that's interesting, because I try to tell people all the time, like, you pocket these wins. Hey, the border's secure. Okay, what are you doing for me now? Crime is down. What are you doing for me now? You passed no tax and tips. What are you doing for me now? And Republicans can't just rest on what I did, but they've got to come up with an agenda of what I'll do for you.
Yeah, exactly. But we also have to talk to our low propensity voters, which means the folks who don't consistently show up in elections, particularly midterm elections. And what I see in the data for those folks is they are still very concerned about illegal immigration as an issue and the threat that it poses. So it really creates this kind of two-track campaign that you have to run, which is, what are we saying and doing to reach the people who would vote for us if they showed up to vote? What do they care about? What threats do they see? How do we raise those threats up? Because, my book, America's Emotional Divide, tells us that scientific research shows anger is the number one motivator for turnout. The Democrats are pissed off at Trump, and they're turning out to vote against him. And they'll vote against every Republican because they hate Trump so much. So how do we create that same anger on our side? What are those issues that fire our people up? And then the persuasion piece, which is the plan. What's the plan for what's next? How radically insane are Democrats? We did a battery of questions in the survey this month saying, how much do you trust each of these economic systems to deliver the best outcome for the most amount of Americans? So we said free market, capitalism, socialism, communism. Those were the four options. Everybody had to rate each of those. 61% of strong Democrats said that socialism will produce the best outcomes for the most amount of Americans. That's what we're running against, and that's the contrast that has to be made.
Okay. One of the things that stood out to me in this deck that you guys put out, and people, where if people want to get, by the way, just before I forget this, if they want to see the national polling that you guys do, this deck, and where do you want them to go?
Great question. So our website is cygn.al. No comms, no nets, just cygn.al. And every month we post not just our data, but here's our analysis. And it's a deep analysis. It is like,
oh yeah,
pages and pages of analysis of what is happening, why is it happening, what needs to be done from here. So if you're a political nerd or just intrigued by what's going on and why it's going on, every month we're, about a little before the middle of the month, we're posting this data.
Yeah. So for those of you listening, I know most people spell signal with a S, but this is signal with a C, Cygnal. So I just want to make sure anyway, but the one thing that did stand out that I want to just end with is this, because we talk about messaging and how to get voters, but there was a line in your deck that jumped out at me and it frankly scared me. It said trust in socialism, which is now 34%, nearly matches trust in capitalism nationally among voters 18 to 29. Socialism beats capitalism 55 to 38 among strong Democrats. Brent, this is a problem.
Yes. It is a huge problem, but we have to ask ourselves why. Because it's not just that they're Democrats or socialists. Many of them are. That's why Mamdani has, 750 candidates recruited for the Democratic Socialists of America. I hope to God every one of them wins their Democrat primary and loses in the general. But why do those people feel that way? I think there's two reasons. One, our K through 12 schools and our universities have been taken over by progressives and socialists, and Republicans let it happen over the last 50 years. And so now kids who go into that come out one of those, socialists or communists. But two, the capitalistic system isn't working for a large number of people. And so we have to be honest with ourselves and say, what needs to be done to ensure that this system that has made America the most prosperous country on earth of all time continue to do that another 250 years and not fall into the trap that a lot of countries fall into in their couple hundreds of years history, first part of their history.
Okay. Brent Buchanan, Signal Polling, again, it's Cygnal. Their national monthly voter polling update is phenomenal. A lot of great information on there if you have more information. Brent, thanks for joining us Sunday. Thanks for being with us. Guys, we will be right back. I'm going to give you an update on redistricting. You're listening to Full Court Press with Sean Spicer on WABC.
This is Full Court Press with Sean Spicer on 77 WABC. Welcome to your personal briefing. The Full Court Press is on the air. Now, here's Sean Spicer.
Good Sunday morning. Welcome back. You're listening to Full Court Press. I'm your host, Sean Spicer, here on WABC. We had a lot beyond the China trip. By the way, that polling from Brent Buchanan. As I mentioned, if you want, go check out the full deck. All the results. Don't take my word for it. But there's a lot more in that deck. These guys do some serious, comprehensive analysis. And like I said, they're just the messenger on this. Like they bring us the data. You don't have to like it. But I think what I get so frustrated with it when Republicans put their head in the sand and say, we don't believe the polls, they're fake. Okay, you don't need to believe them. Not everything has to be 100% accurate. But I will tell you that this is consistent. Like I trust these guys. I know these guys. Like we have plenty of good stuff to tout, to talk about, a great agenda that President Trump has given us. There's a reason the entire book that I wrote, Trump 2.0, is about the agenda and what's happening. You can go to Amazon right now and order it for yourself if you want to keep it a bestseller. But I'm telling you that, like, I saw the movie Trump 1.0. If they take back over, it's going to be impeachment and investigation. They've said it. Believe them when they say it, my friends. They said they're going to impeach him on day one. They're not kidding. They tell us this all the time, what they're going to do. I don't know why we don't take this, like, take them at face value and understand the threat. We've got to, if you're not motivated, maybe there's some things that aren't perfect in the Trump agenda. I get it. I talk to some Maha folks and they'll say, oh, we don't like that he didn't do this or that on glyphosate. I get it. I'm with you. But for goodness sake, think about everything else that's happened. And not only that, but what will happen if the Dems take control? we can't get everything all the time. I learned that as a child. My mom was, you can't get everything. You can't have it all. And I want it all, and I'll fight for it all. Don't get me wrong, but I'm just saying, guys, understand that some of these people are like, I'm not going to vote. Okay, if you don't vote, they win. So get out there and do it. We have too much at stake. They tell us who they are every single day. I get it. And by the way, I get a little disappointed. I think that we should be passing the Save America Act. We should be getting this. This is insane. This is so common sense. John Thune talked about why they can't do it and why they can't pass the filibuster earlier this week. Take a listen.
Where do you stand on that currently? Would you reconsider getting rid of the filibuster to get it across the finish line?
We don't have the votes to get rid of the filibuster. We called it up on the floor March, I think, 17th. We were on it for several weeks and had a very spirited debate. In fact, I think with the exception of maybe a couple of Republican senators, made more speeches on the floor in support of the SAVE Act than almost any other senator. And we had some votes on it. And we voted on the narrow issue, which is the most popular one, of voter ID. And we put the Democrats on the record. Every single Democrat voted against it. We added, and one of the other elements, also popular, was whether or not biological boys ought to play in girls' sports. We had that vote, and every Democrat voted against that as well. So we've taken what I think are probably the two issues, in my view, that have the broadest public support and put the Democrats on record, and every single one of them voted against it. So we'll look for opportunities to get other votes. There was a vote on the budget resolution, an amendment that Senator Kennedy offered that didn't even get 50 votes on the floor. And so we're continuing to look for opportunities to advance that legislation. Obviously, it's something that I support. I think we all support. And we think it's something that the American people are broadly supportive as well. Yeah.
You know what its problem with that is that it's like, hey, we tried. Can't do anything more. Yeah, we tried. And there's a couple things. One, I hate that defeat. Oh, we don't have the votes. Put the filibuster thing up. They're going to do it. They are going to get rid of it if the Democrats get in charge. And I don't know why our side thinks somehow they've got to be sanctimonious and better than their side. Like, they will do this. They are coming for us. And I just, so many times our side wants to be better. And I don't get it. I don't understand why we think somehow they won't do it to us, and so why don't we do it? That's just my 2 cents. I don't understand why we think somehow we'll just do it and then they won't do it because we showed them that we were better than them. Are you kidding me? They're going to do this. Hello. They're going to get rid of the filibuster. They're going to jam all their crap through. They literally were 2 votes short of it last time, and both of those members, Kristen Sinema of Arizona and Joe Manchin of West Virginia, are gone and replaced by people who will, if they get the majority. And so for Thune to be like, yeah, but I also will add to this. Sometimes I think we place all of the blame, he does need some of it. But also remember, he is telling you, like, why are we not going after the people who are voting no? These are Republicans, Mitch McConnell, etc. I mean, Thune he can do everything he can, but we should be putting more pressure on them. Absolutely. And that's where I would fault them. Call these guys out. Start putting it down. Like, if you're Mitch McConnell, what is it that's wrong about photo ID? What you opposed to people being citizens of this country and having to show ID? Like, what we need to start John Thune deserves some of the blame. Do not get me wrong on this. But I brought this up with Steve Bannon on my show. If you want to go watch the entire thing on Friday, go to my YouTube channel and watch it, because I asked him the same thing. Don't we also need to blame some of the actual Republican senators who are voting no? I mean, Thune can do a lot, don't get me wrong, to help move this along. But at the end of the day, he also has to recognize that, like, that's them. Like, we got to name names and put some pressure on them. The pressure is working. Pressure is working on the redistricting front. I'm going to get to that in just a sec. And let's be clear, because I talk about the agenda, like what they'll do. Yes, the Senate Democrats will get rid of the filibuster. But you want to know what's going to happen if the House flips? This is Ted Lieu. Okay, he is a gadfly member of Congress from California. I want to play Ted Lieu first for you and just show you what I'm talking about, because this is like one of their gadfly guys, Ted Lieu from California. Go.
This is a radical Supreme Court that is making decisions simply to benefit Republicans. It's going to usher in massive Supreme Court reform when Democrats take control, and that will be because of the actions of extreme political actor John Roberts in this partisan Supreme Court.
Okay, so I wanted to start with this to just show you Ted Lieu. He's got a voice. They love him on the left. He's on MS Now all the time. I finally got that straight. That's what it's called. But I wanted to start with that because you might say, oh, Sean, he's not a serious voice. He's a gadfly. You heard him, a massive, utter change. Okay, what about his colleague from California, Ro Khanna? This is what he tweeted out. And I'd say Ro Khanna would go up the scale. More prominent, more serious. He said this: the next Democratic White House does not need a court reform commission like some college seminar. We need action. We need term limits for justices. We need to expand this morally bankrupt court from 9 to 13. Okay, that's Ro Khanna. So I take you up a notch. I go Ted Lieu, crazy, nutty, left wing, gadfly. Ro Khanna, okay, progressive crazy, but he's taken a lot more seriously. And you heard what he said. We need to pack the court. Because again, let's just be clear, because they're not getting their way. Court was fine when it was a bunch of libs. So I do you this because I wanted to escalate this. Now let's go to the leader of the Democratic Party from New York, Hakeem Jeffries. Because if it's one thing for the gadflies or even some of the other rank and file to say something. This is Hakeem Jeffries, though. He's the leader. You get no higher than this. This will be their speaker if they get in charge. And here's what he says. Go.
In a period of time, we do have these structural problems that need to be addressed. We've got to, for instance, make sure we pass the John Robert Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act so we can end the era of voter suppression in the United States of America once and for all. We have to end Citizens United, dramatically reform our campaign finance laws to stop the ability of these deep-pocketed special interests to intervene. And we are going to have to explore massive judicial reform, state by state, and at the federal level, and everything should be on the table as far as I'm concerned.
Okay. Everything on the table, reforms, this is the agenda. Listen to what they're telling us. They're going to do it. This is not some kind of hidden ball trick or Abigail Spanberger running in Virginia where I'm going to pretend that I'm a moderate. They're saying the quiet part out loud. Memo to all of us. That's what's at stake. So, how do we maintain a majority? Now, I'm going to give you a quick recap because a lot happening in redistricting. I believe, based on my analysis, that Republicans right now have about 212 safe seats. You need 218 for a majority. That's a pretty conservative estimate by me. So, I didn't take math in college, but here we go. 212, we need 6 to go. There's about 16 toss-up seats. Republicans need to get 6 of those 16. They get a majority back, okay? But there's some action happening right now that I want to update you on. In South Carolina, there is a special session that's about to occur to go after this North Charleston seat, which is held by Jim Clyburn. You might remember him. I've talked about him in the past. Henry McMaster called the special session. Now, why is this important? Because initially the House of Representatives in Charleston, in South Carolina, passed a redistricting effort, 87-12. Okay, but it was stymied in the state Senate because they needed a 2/3 majority. So here's the workaround. McMaster calls a special session. He's the governor. Now it only needs a simple majority. So guess what, folks? That's an additional seat. They're going to pass it. Jim Clyburn's about to go bye-bye. This is a big deal, by the way. This guy, like him or not, he's a titan. This is a big deal. He resurrected Joe Biden. The reason that Joe Biden is president is because Jim Clyburn came in, gave him his stamp of approval ahead of the South Carolina primary, and Jim Clyburn holds a lot of sway with black voters in Charleston, South Carolina, and liberal voters too, but particularly with black voters. And he put him over the top. Biden wins the South Carolina primary. He gets rector-adjuted. He goes on to sit in the White House for 4 years in a chair and drools on himself. We know how that ended. But the bottom line is this is a big deal. That's an additional one. So my 212 just went to 213 if this happens. Move to Georgia. Mixed, interesting move. Brian Kemp, the Republican governor there, says they're going to redistrict. Oh, that's great. But here's the catch. They're not going to do it until they'll do it now, but it won't go into effect into 2028. We had the opportunity to potentially pick up 2 additional seats in Georgia. There's 2. We could have gotten them. Brian Kemp, the Republican governor, oh, I don't want to do it. I don't want to do it. Anyway, it's just, it's unfortunate because we could have gotten one additional seat there easily. Now, Louisiana, I'm a little bit more hopeful on. They are almost finalized this opportunity to get one additional seat. That's great. And here's the thing. If you've been following me on Twitter, where I've been doing a lot of this, like I am talking to people all the time about redistricting and what's going on. And Alabama, I said, was going to be +1, and we got it. There's a potential they go back in, because their primaries aren't until August, and push for that second seat. There had always been a 2-step process where they're going to get one seat this year and then redo it again and get a second seat next time. But it looks like there's still an effort. That again, you do that, that's now another seat as well. I will tell you another funny story, though, because now Tennessee is also making moves. They've got this seat in the Memphis area that's reserved. I mean, that's what it was, reserved for a black Democrat. But here's the funny kicker on this, because you never hear about this, do you? It's represented by a white guy named Steve Cohen. And no Democrats seem to have a problem with that. Now, apparently he does a good job. Frankly, that's how it should be, right? You run, you do a good job, you get reelected. That's how the system's supposed to work. But this was a set-aside seat for a black person in the Memphis area of Tennessee. And no one seems to care on the left that it's represented by a white guy named Steve Cohen. So they are redistricting in Tennessee. Good news. You want to know what the kicker is, though? This is what I absolutely love. The Democrats may lose that seat. The white guy representing the so-called black district may lose to a black female Republican in Tennessee. Isn't that so awesome? I love that. The idea that literally the Democrats have been trying, we're going to lose black representation. No, actually, you're going to trade a white Democrat who's representing a district that you guys carved out for a black guy, and it'll be represented by a black female Republican. I have a feeling that somehow they're suddenly going to care about, they're not going to mention that suddenly that district is now represented by a Republican, even if she's black, because it really was never about that. It never was. It was always about power. Always about power. And that's the thing that you got to understand right now. So I'm just telling you, it's such a kicker to me to listen to these guys, because they're all full of it. That's just not how this stuff works. Anyway, I love doing the show because the beauty is bringing you guys insights that, as I said, there are a lot of smart people out there with smart insights, and I love that. But I also love the idea of bringing you political insights like Brent Buchanan talked today. You're not going to hear that anywhere else. You're just not. You might get on a cable show for 2 or 3 minutes to say some top line stuff, but no one's going to bring you the insight and the analysis that we can on this show here on WABC. It's always my pleasure to be with you on Sunday mornings. Thanks for tuning in. As always, you can always follow me every day on YouTube. We have a show in the morning live, 8:30 a.m. called The Huddle that you can join and ask questions on. And then my show airs every single night on YouTube as well at 6 p.m. We premiere. This week we've got the pollster Scott Rasmussen, Senator Ron Johnson on Tuesday, and Andrew Giuliani. Yep, he's going to be on Wednesday to talk about his dad and what's going on in FIFA. I'll see you back here next Sunday on Full Court Press.